Good morning, Malta and Gozo, and welcome to another edition of Lovin Daily. I'm your host, Jonathan Cilia, joined by my co-host, Sam Vassallo, and here are your headlines for today. Chris Fearn opens up about the vital scandal, COVID-19 timeline, euthanasia, and party media in a new interview. Bernard GRECH reveals new shadow cabinet, post-reshuffle. Samantha GASAN, 27-year-old activist, named new disabilities commissioner. An unknown condition kept this Maltese man sleepless for over 1 year. And Donald Trump exits stage as Joe Biden becomes the 46th president of the USA. Sam, do you want to just jump into the first story?
For sure. So, Lovin Malta sat down with Health Minister Chris Fearn, who opened up about some pretty potent topics, from the vital scandal to the COVID-19 timeline, euthanasia, and of course, party media. So the last time Lovin Malta sat down with him, there was the leadership race a year ago. You know, he was contesting against Robert Abela, and a year on, Robert Abela is Prime Minister, and Chris Fearn is leading the fight against the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Chris Fearn was very frank about all of the topics we asked him about, particularly the COVID-19 timeline. You know, the idea is that by May we have a large cohort of people vaccinated, but he said, you know, we still need to be realistic about this. It could be that we're still wearing masks beyond that. Talking about the vital scandal, you know, he said that he's seen no evidence of corruption or fraud to his knowledge. Very interesting topics, I think, no?
He touched on everything. We asked him if he's interested in ever running for party leadership again. He said, no, and there's no vacancy for leadership. But beyond that, he said, beyond the one or two things, he pretty much agreed with everything Robert Abela has done, all the decisions taken during the pandemic. So on the whole part, they're definitely in agreement. We asked him about the party media debate, whether one and that should be closed down if they're unconstitutional. And he, came out very strongly saying, quote, "I think it's very dangerous that you're trying to muzzle parts of our society from having an active voice. I believe in pluralism." However, immediately afterwards, he admitted that it's not very acceptable for companies not to publish their financial accounts for up to 10 years, as one and Net have. Really interesting interview. Check it out on lovinmalta.com, as well as our Facebook page. It's there right now. Moving on to another major political story that happened yesterday. Finally, Bernard GRECH has revealed his new shadow cabinet after a bit of a reshuffle, and there's some really interesting tidbits to be gleaned from it. So one thing that I think jumps out is Jason Otsapardi, someone who's obviously often in the courts, speaks about good governance a lot, and is very much closely connected to the fight for justice. Is no longer justice spokesperson. He's been moved to employment spokesperson, and Carol Aquilina will now be the parliamentary group's spokesperson for justice. Now, Carol Aquilina as well is often in protest. We've seen him in the streets last year, and he's spoken about good governance as well, so he's still a major player. But I think a lot of people weren't expecting Jason to be taken from this position. Another interesting thing is former leader Adrian Delia, who's still part of the PN, who's still an active politician, decided not to form part of the shadow cabinet. So a lot of speculation had been whether the former leader would be part of the new cabinet. He will not be. So quite some interesting changes here.
Indeed, I think another notable figure that is still in the cabinet, the shadow cabinet, is Stephen Spiteri, who is shadowing the health portfolio. Now, Lovin Malta had previously revealed, that Stephen Spiteri is facing major allegations of misconduct after, handing out prescriptions for €5 a pop. So I do feel like Bernard GRECH, didn't really put his foot down. But, having said that, I'm excited to see what comes out of the next general election. Hopefully we'll see some fresh faces who can really shake up the opposition party. Moving on to our next story, Samantha GASAN, 27-year-old activist, has been named the new Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities. Super exciting. Well done to Samantha GASAN. If you don't know who she is, at just a young age, she's been active in politics, activism. She started out in Girl Guides. She moved on to the Youth Council, pushing for better sexual health for Malta, even founding an NGO for young women leaders in Malta. She's truly making her mark at just a tender age. And besides her personal achievements, she's also faced some major personal struggles. In fact, in 2018, she ruptured a main artery. She has Marfan syndrome. She suffered a mild stroke and lost sight from her right eye, but that didn't stop her from achieving her dreams, and now she is Malta's second ever Commissioner for Persons with Disabilities.
No, it's brilliant to see, a woman in this role, first of all. She's only the second ever Disabilities Commissioner after Oliver Scicluna, who was the first, was co-opted as an MP earlier this week. And I think what's important is if you look at her story and her background, you see how close she is to disabilities and to this community. Her sister has Down syndrome, Naomi GASAN, and you might have actually seen Naomi recently because she spent a day shadowing Prime Minister Robert Abela. I think it was a really great move to see, a young female spending time with pretty much the most powerful person in Malta and getting a first-hand experience of that. And apart from that, she's spoken. GASAN has spoken about her own disability, saying, quote, "I've accepted my disability, it is part of my identity. I have my own personality, things I love, perseverance, and the resilience to go on." So it's great to see such positivity coming out from the new Disabilities Commissioner. We'll have to see, what kind of steps she takes in her new role. Moving on to a very interesting story that we published yesterday. This is something that we've all had sleepless nights. We've all had, those nights where you're lying in bed, tossing and turning, trying to get to sleep, and it just doesn't happen. But one Maltese 29-year-old, Carl Merchia, hasn't had a good night of sleep in a year. It's been an entire year since he's slept well, and he needs to take a ton of medicine to even get 3 hours of sleep a night. Merchia's, opened up about his challenges. He started a YouTube page, opening up and explaining just how hard it is when you've gone weeks, months, a year without a proper night sleep. He spent time in Mount Carmel as well. And when you start looking at the sheer amount of medicine he needs to take to even get to sleep, it kind of like, you have to reflect a bit like, okay, my challenges aren't that problematic. Tossing and turning for 10, 15 minutes is nothing compared to this guy's story. What did you make of his story?
I mean, I felt, sleep is one of my favorite things in the world, so I felt really privileged that I'm able to get a good night's sleep. And I think what was really interesting is his story was met with a flood of comments of people going through, a lot of people are going through insomnia or these conditions where they can't get to sleep. They were offering him, recommendations of what they're taking, maybe he should try medical cannabis and whatever. Hopefully he gets the right medical assessments and manages to get to sleep sooner than later. On to our last story. Donald Trump has left the White House. He has exited as Joseph Biden becomes the 46th president of the USA. If you were following yesterday, there was the inauguration of President Joe Biden. It was a full lineup. There was Jennifer Lopez who performed, Lady Gaga, Gareth Brooks, countryman who sang an a cappella of Amazing Grace. It was very emotional. There was a young black poet, Amanda Gorman, who made an emotional self-penned poem, which is super great. We just watched history being made. In fact, on his first day, he signed over 70 executive orders, including putting America back into the Paris Agreement, the COVID checks. Super, super cool.
No, as you said, it was a historical moment. First female black vice president in Kamala Harris. I feel like there was a lot of positivity in the inauguration. I feel like everyone was tuned in. As you said, there was superstar singers. There was lots of smiles. Donald Trump himself did not stay for the inauguration. Typically, the former president will be there to kind of, give a handshake or an elbow shake in COVID times, and kind of, show that there's a peaceful transfer of power. The last we saw of Trump was him leaving in a helicopter. I think he was playing My Way of Frank Sinatra, so typical Trump fashion. But it's great to see Biden, come in the beginning of the Biden era. After the inauguration later on in the day, he held a virtual Zoom meeting with his over 1,000 political appointees, all the people that would be helping him, carry out his mandate and carry out his vision for the country. And it was just interesting to see them, swear allegiance via Zoom. So we truly are living in the future now, especially now that Trump is gone. I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Both from myself and Sam, have a day full of lovin'.